was an important and a difficult day, a long day for Dr. Ford, for Judge Kavanaugh, for the Senate Judiciary Committee, for our nation. And I will sexual assault, to seek a nomination to a federal court or other position of trust, or to serve here. And as a result, I tonight will pray for our nation. The burden on this committee was to address, investigate, and resolve reasonable doubts as to credible allegations against the nominee before that. And by that test, this committee has failed. I know we have heard strong words about many of our colleagues. And my predecessor, long-serving senator and former chairman of this committee, Joe Biden, has been quoted by many, and I would say misquoted at times. But I want to share one quote, one thing he said to me when I began my service here, which was, "It is always appropriate to question another senator's policies. It is always appropriate to question another senator's priorities, but it is never appropriate to question another senator's motives." And there has been far too much of that that's happened in this process in a way that, frankly, will make it very difficult for us to take off our partisan jerseys and at some point get back to the important work of finding solutions to the real challenges facing this country. What I have been searching for in this process is the facts. And I recognize many of my colleagues on the other side do not see it that way. Many of you have questioned the timing of when this allegation surfaced, and you have also said there are not enough facts corroborating Dr. Ford's testimony to ruin a good man. I strongly disagree with both of these points and want to explain briefly why. The first time I learned of Dr. Ford's allegations that Judge Kavanaugh had sexually assaulted her was on September 12th. Ranking Member Feinstein disclosed this highly sensitive information to myself and other Democrats on this committee only after reporters had learned of the letter Dr. Ford had provided her Congresswoman. I don't know how this information leaked. I regret that it did. The decision whether to come forward should have been Dr. Ford's and Dr. Ford's alone. And I cannot rule out that the person who leaked this information had a partisan agenda. But I am certain Ranking Member Feinstein and her staff did not disclose Dr. Ford's account prior to that date because it was not theirs to share. And I think it's regrettable that long-serving, honorable colleagues of hers have questioned her motives. I know since the day that my Democratic colleagues and I learned of these allegations, we've had one consistent request: to allow the FBI to investigate them in a nonpartisan, professional, even-handed manner and deliver their findings to us so that we could reach a conclusion. That same night, Ranking Member Feinstein sent a letter requesting such an investigation. To suggest that Senate staff interviews or letters from lawyers are an adequate substitute for a robust FBI fact-gathering process that we might then weigh is not credible and reflects, sadly, a willful blindness to the dysfunction of our institution. To my colleagues across the aisle, you know me. You know I try to be fair to nominees that come before us, and I respect this process and the humanity of those, even those with whom I passionately disagree. If I were convinced this were nothing more than a partisan hit job designed to take down a good man and hold a position vacant past the election, I would not stand for it. An investigation would be helpful because Dr. Ford's recollection shared with us so powerfully yesterday of her assault were searing but incomplete. Dr. Ford testified credibly about painful memories she's carried with her to this day. The feeling of a hand clasped over her mouth and her not being able to breathe.
We'll never get to it.
The sound of laughter while she was pinned on a bed. The weight of a body on top of hers groping her and the feeling of relief fleeing the house. Dr. Ford testified with 100% certainty that the person who assaulted her was Brett Kavanaugh, whom she knew through multiple acquaintances and had socialized with on multiple occasions. But it is true, as has been widely repeated, that Dr. Ford cannot pinpoint the date or the time of the assault, the exact location, and that she did not tell anyone about that assault at that time. There is not an eyewitness who has been able to provide the details of this, all of which is typical of sexual assault. Many experts have written how common it is for assault survivors to remember some facts with searing clarity, but not others, which has to do with the survival mode that turns on when we experience trauma. The vast majority of sexual assault victims delay disclosing what happened to them or never disclose it at all. One of the most striking things about this hearing for me has been the so far five personal friends, acquaintances, people I've known for years or decades who've conveyed to me their experiences of sexual assault on this phone while this testimony was going on. That suggests that there is an ocean of pain in this nation, not yet fully heard, not yet fully addressed, not yet appropriately resolved. And I, for one, will not countenance the refrain said by too many in response to these allegations by Dr. Ford that it happened too long ago and that in our nation, boys will be boys. We must do better than that, and we must set a better standard than that for our own families and for our future. I worry sincerely about the message we are sending to assault survivors if we plow ahead with this nomination, despite the seriousness of the allegations. And I have conveyed to my friends and colleagues that I had wished we would take a 1-week pause, 1 week only, not to spread this out past the next election, not to pursue some partisan goal, but to allow a professional FBI interview with everyone who may have relevant information, starting, yes, with Mark Judge, who obviously, given the vote of this committee this morning, will not be subpoenaed to appear before us. I'll remind you briefly that many of those who came forward to support Judge Kavanaugh, including my own professor from Yale Law School, Akhil Amar, and an organization I've long belonged to, the American Bar Association, have spoken up to also request a thorough and professional background investigation. I think to ask for a week is not to ask for too much. When Professor Anita Hill came forward, the White House cooperated, and in 4 days, a hearing was put together with 22 witnesses. I think that's what Dr. Ford deserves. I think that's what her bravery deserves, and I think that's what our nation deserves. I will not go through a long point-by-point refutation of what we've just heard from some of my colleagues, but let me simply say a few things about Dr. Ford's testimony. As I've said, she bore the pain of this attack alone for far too long, but her memories did not stay hers alone. Dr. Ford told her now husband in 2002. She told therapists in 2012 and 2013. She told friends in 2013, 2016, 2017, 2018, and has submitted testimony about all of that to this committee. Dr. Ford, when she came forward yesterday, had nothing to gain and a lot to lose. She came forward to testify about her experience of assault, and I'm going to use her words. She said, "I'm here today not because I want to be. I am terrified. I'm here because I believe it is my civic duty to tell you what happened to me while Brett Kavanaugh and I were in high school. Civic duty, to tell the truth." What has always struck me is that Dr. Ford came forward to voice concerns about Judge Kavanaugh before he was nominated. She reached out to her congresswoman anonymously, to the Washington Post tip line as well, when Judge Kavanaugh's name was on the president's short list. She was not lying in wait for an opportune time to make a big reveal to sink a nominee. Rather, she had wanted this information to get to the president before he made his selection so the president could pick someone else. I wish he had. Judge Kavanaugh yesterday unequivocally denied the allegations against him. But something he said repeatedly, importantly, was not accurate. Over and over again, he testified, and we've just heard it repeated here today, that Dr. Ford's account was refuted by 3 individuals Dr. Ford identified as being present. That's not the case, and Judge Kavanaugh knows it. Not recalling is not the same as refuting. Their statements issued through lawyers say they don't remember the gathering. Of course, none of these 3 people were assaulted that night. For 2 of them, it would have been an unremarkable evening, just another casual summer among friends. And Leland Kaiser says that she believes Dr. Ford's account, a fact not acknowledged by my colleagues or Judge Kavanaugh. I'll also say that in my view, the failure of this committee to subpoena Mark Judge, whom Dr. Ford identified as a witness and participant in her attack, is a failure in this committee's effort to get to the truth. We also have to face the reality. There are additional serious allegations brought in sworn statements by Ms. Ramirez and Ms. Swetnick, who have both asked for an FBI investigation into their claims. Their claims have varying credibility, but deserve to be heard. I wish Judge Kavanaugh would have pointedly supported a short pause for an FBI investigation for the benefit of clearing his own name. But I'll say, as I conclude, there is something much greater, in my mind, at stake. The fact that Judge Kavanaugh is nominated to the Supreme Court means this is not just about his credibility and the remaining concerns about his credibility that I will carry forward. It's about the court's legitimacy. We're left with the reality that if his nomination goes forward this morning, after testimony full of rage and partisanship and vitriol, but without even a brief pause for a nonpartisan investigation into the serious allegations presented, his service may well have an asterisk. Litigants coming to the court will have reason to question the fairness of the institution. And in my view, that is too great a cost to impose on our system of justice in exchange for any one man. It is my hope that my colleagues, those who have not yet decided or declared their decision, will still join in a request to allow the FBI to do its important work and for this committee to allow itself the time to get to the bottom of the remaining allegations. Given the vote this morning, I know that is highly unlikely. I initially announced my opposition to Judge Kavanaugh after our previous round of hearings had concluded. Those hearings began without a declared position by many of my colleagues on this side. In the end, for me, it was Judge Kavanaugh's extreme views on presidential power that I engaged with him vigorously on, and that I believe I engaged with him respectfully on, that determined my vote on him. But for us to proceed today without giving the thoughtful, serious, and thorough investigation of credible allegations before us is for this committee to fail to do its job. I pray that after today, we may yet find a way to work together because our community, our country, and our world deserves no less. Thank you.
I'm going to ask my colleagues on this side of the aisle if, and I'm not going to ask the Democrats to do this, but could we kind of, I've only interrupted Senator Cruz, could we kind of make sure that we keep our remarks a little short so everybody can speak? Senator Kennedy? Okay, I guess I'm wrong. Senator Crapo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will do that. I just wanted to respond first to a number of the comments that have been made about, again, needing the FBI investigation and what the dynamic of what this committee has done is. It's been said that this committee has changed its procedure. This is the first time that it's conducted its business in this way. Again, as I said yesterday, I think that needs to be clarified and corrected. The fact is that when the FBI does its background investigation, it does just that, a background investigation. It talks to people who may have information about the nominee and takes a statement from them, and then delivers its package of investigative information to the White House, which passes it on to the committee, which is the report that this committee receives from the FBI. It's been said that President Bush reopened the FBI investigation when the Anita Hill information came out. My understanding is, and if I'm wrong on this, Mr. Chairman, please correct me, but my understanding is that when you, as the chairman, finally found out about the information, that information also went to the FBI. Perhaps it was the ranking member who gave the information, the letter to the FBI, but the FBI was given the information. Is that correct?
That is correct, and they said to the White House, in the usual way they do, that they considered it closed.
So the 2 points there. First of all, the full letter, unredacted, was given to the FBI, and the FBI did what it does, and I don't know exactly what they did in the Anita when the Anita Hill information came out. My understanding is, and if I'm wrong on this, Mr. Chairman, please correct me, but my understanding is that when you, as the chairman, finally found out about the the information, that information also went to the FBI. Perhaps it was the ranking member who gave the information, the letter to the FBI, but the FBI was given the information. Is that correct?
That is correct, and they said to the White House, in the usual way they do, that they considered it closed.
So the 2 points there. First of all, the full letter, unredacted, was given to the FBI, and the FBI did what it does, and I don't know exactly what they did in the Anita Hill case, but did exactly what it usually does, which is to reopen it, if you will, evaluate the letter, and then again, I understand that the FBI then closed it and sent the information to the White House as they did with the previous report before this allegation came up. Is that correct, Mr. Chairman?
The only thing I can verify is that the FBI did what they would usually do, and that they then, and I don't know what that was, and they probably would keep their own internal stuff to themselves, but they sent a cover letter to the White House saying the issue was closed.
So the FBI did look at this. The FBI did whatever it does in its background check activities, and then resent an updated amount of information to the White House, which the White House then forwarded to us. And then the process which has traditionally been followed in this committee was followed again. And I believe that immediately the chairman opened up an investigation by this committee. That also is customary practice. And as has been stated yesterday, but I will restate again, our committee investigative staff, which is extensive and well-trained, has legal authorities similar to the types that FBI agents do, such that when they conduct their investigations, the people who are interviewed and those who are reached out to by the committee are under penalty of a felony that could result in 5 years imprisonment if they don't respond honestly and correctly to the questions. Every one of the witnesses that was identified has been reached out to. Now, some comments have been, well, they didn't actually submit themselves to a deposition or to some kind of a court process or something like that. As has already been very well explained by some of our other colleagues, when a witness refuses to testify, the alternative is to try to get a statement from them, which the FBI does or the committee does. And in this case, statements under penalty of felony were obtained from all of the witnesses. So I think the argument here that there was some process followed that was not fair is simply inaccurate. The argument that the process followed was not the same as the committee has followed in the past is also inaccurate, and I think that's very critical. Now, to turn to the issue at hand, yesterday we received hours and hours of testimony from 2 witnesses, and both of them, frankly, made very strong cases. This committee is under the need to evaluate the testimony that was given and determine how it will judge or rule on on the obligation this committee has to give advice and consent. In that context, I came away believing that there had in fact been a sexual assault in Dr. Ford's past. As has been stated, it was not entirely clear when, where, and all of the circumstances, but there's no doubt in my mind that she truthfully testified that she had a sexual assault, had been assaulted sexually in her past. I have to say I also listened very carefully to Judge Kavanaugh as he testified, and I felt that the testimony he gave was also honest. He gave, I thought, very strong testimony that he was not there. And so I think that this committee has to face the difficult task of what burden of proof does it apply, what standard does it apply in exercising the advice and consent that it gives, and that's a very difficult thing that each one of us individually needs to face and deal with. As I've said, I don't feel that the evidence shows that Judge Kavanaugh was there that night. I believed his testimony. I believed Dr. Ford's testimony about the sexual assault. And because of that, I will vote yes today to move the nomination forward to the floor.
Mr. Chairman, this has been obviously my first process, my first time through a Supreme Court nomination process. I fought for years to be on this committee. It's the one I wanted to be on as soon as I got to the United States Senate in 2013. I made you aware of that, sir, and the ranking member. And it has this vaunted institution. When a Supreme Court vacancy happened, I was one of those individuals that did not wait long before I announced my intentions to vote against Judge Kavanaugh. And sir, I did it for sincerely and deeply held beliefs. I did it because I felt that this was a person that had made it clear in that entire list of people prepared by the Federalist Society and the Heritage Foundation that this was a guy that spoke directly towards a view of presidential power, presidential immunities, that in this perilous time where a president is a subject of a criminal investigation, that he was going to protect that president, and said as much. Make sure that the president was above the law and accountability. And sir, I've learned a lot. I'm one of the guys that on this side of the aisle, when my colleagues speak on the other side of the aisle, I listen. I try to give them my full attention. And I don't always agree, but I've learned a lot from my colleagues. And my friendships on the other side of the aisle, my sincere friendships, there's been times during these hearings I've texted back and forth with people on the other side of the aisle. I respect them. And I fought hard during this process. I've given it everything I've got. I've learned that, heck, going back to being a football player, that between the whistles, you fight as hard as you can for what you believe. And if you want to call that partisanship, fine. I've been exuberant in my beliefs, and I've learned a lot through this process. Some of my comments have been referenced numerous times, and I know that I have not been as precise and have allowed my comments to be mischaracterized, and I don't blame those people who've mischaracterized some of my comments. I take responsibility and have learned to be more precise. And I talk to these issues and I talk to my values as much as I can. I travel around this country calling for more comedy, calling for us respecting, seeing the dignity of Republicans and Democrats and recognizing as much as I can. And I say it, patriotism is love of country, and you cannot love your country unless you love all your countrymen and women. The goodness and the decency of Republicans and Democrats in this country is self-evident. And we demonize each other in ways that I will be and continue to be an exemplar of trying to get our dialogue to rise to something different, to be a country that sees that we need each other, that there's no Democratic or Republican way to success, there's only an American way. And sir, you know, and I hope, and I've said this to you personally, and I think I've said enough publicly, that in the hardness with which I fight, I mean you no personal insult, but I did say before, and I say now, before Dr. Ford's charges came up, I say very sincerely that I think that the way this process was run was a sham. I used that word, sir. And it was because we were evaluating someone for the highest court in the land with seeing such a small part of his relevant work product. I didn't understand how so much of his writing, approximately 90% of his relevant work product, was not even being seen by this committee and controlled by a process that was so broken, so partisan. And then, sir, I violated the rules that you put forward in this committee, willfully and knowingly, and accepting the consequences of that. And I did so because the documents that were being withheld from the public, I felt the public had a right to know, and they weren't classified. There was no national security issues. And gosh, we disagreed on that, sir, and I locked horns with people across the aisle. And even after all that, I was grateful for the comedy. The gentleman I knocked horns with most said to me, you know what? I was taught to hate the sin, but love the sinner. I really love being on this committee. I love it. From living in Newark, New Jersey, this is where I wanted to be, sir. I wanted to be on a committee that dealt with issues of justice in this country, because I feel that when we swear an oath to liberty and justice for all, I don't think we're there yet as a country. And I have to say now, as I'm sitting here, that I deeply resent this idea that somehow when Dr. Ford came forward, that this dealt with partisanship. This is shifted this debate in this committee and in this country from raw partisanship to something much deeper. I have such respect for the ranking member. And I was in the room when we discussed, literally hours after I was made aware that the letter existed, about what her motivations were. It was a private room, and forgive me for speaking out of turn if the ranking member believes I am, but her entire sense of decency and honor had nothing to do with politics. Politics was not mentioned. Her entire concerns were about the dignity and the humanity and the respect for Dr. Ford. The conversation we had was about the best way to handle the information that was just presented to all of us. I've now been in numerous caucus meetings where politics has not been discussed, where what has been done was some of the most eloquent speeches I've heard in our caucus meetings from my colleagues about issues of sexual assault, issues of rape. I've heard colleagues read letters that had been written, not by a Democrat or Republicans, but by Americans who are concerned about this issue. This is not a partisan moment for our country. Back in the early 1990s, I was a student during the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas, during those hearings. And I think there's people on both sides of the aisle that agree that that was dealt with wrong, that the process then did not merit the dignity and decency of the folks involved or of the issue of sexual harassment. But yet that involved multiple hearings. That involved multiple witnesses. That involved the FBI investigation. And yet we still criticize that process. But now we're here today, and we have fallen even far short of what I believed was an inadequate process. Sir, this is not about partisanship. And a lot of folks are trying to make this about whether she was flying to California or not, whether the letter was authorized or released or not, whether the process served her or not. That seems to be stripping away the heroism of Ms. Ford, of Dr. Ford, to come before this committee willingly, even under circumstances that she said herself were not her wishes. She asked for an FBI investigation. She asked for more witnesses. She wasn't given what she asked for, and she still came here and sat before this committee. And what did she say, sir? When someone has the courage to speak to one of the most powerful bodies in the land, what did she say? She shared a raw and visceral and credible, a profoundly powerful testimony with this committee and the world, and she was believable. I believe her. She told us of her indelible memory, using words like seared into her memory, speaking to brain chemistry in a way. She spoke of uproarious laughter, of Brett Kavanaugh and Mark Judge being pinned to a bed, being hand over the mouth, fearing for her life, that she was terrified of being raped or accidentally killed. When asked by this committee what level of certainty, this wasn't, I don't know, I'm not 100% sure. She said, I am 100% certain that it was Judge Kavanaugh, consistent with other folks who experience sexual violence. It was seared into her memory. She knows 100%. And that's credible because she knew him. She had interacted with him socially before he attacked her. She didn't need to pick him out of a lineup of teenagers and some random attack. She knew him. Dr. Ford's credible testimony does not stand on its own. It is bolstered by significant corroboration. In 2012, 2013, 2014, 2016, she spoke of it. She told it to 5 people. Long before Judge Kavanaugh was nominated to the Supreme Court, she told multiple people that she had been sexually assaulted as a teenager. In some instances, she identified him specifically by name. In others, she described her attacker as a federal judge. Each of these individuals have provided this committee with their sworn statements attesting to these facts. We could have called those individuals to testify that this was not what I've heard, part of a coordinated attack, something to do with the Clintons and all the other allegations. This is somebody in the early years had talked about Brett Kavanaugh assaulting her. It's not some kind of political attack. This is consistent not only with her statements that have been corroborated, it's consistent what we know about other people who have undergone sexual attacks. And beyond the corroboration of outside witnesses, Dr. Ford's account is also corroborated by independent facts. Facts, not opinions. The fact that Dr. Ford identified Mark Judge and P.J. Smith as others who were friends of Kavanaugh and present at the gathering is corroborated. It's also corroborated in Judge Kavanaugh's own calendar, as we've seen. Judge Kavanaugh documented a gathering on July 1st, 1982 that included Mark Judge, P.J. Smith, and a reference to alcohol. Dr. Ford testified that shortly after the assault, around 6 to 8 weeks later, in her estimation, she ran into Mark Judge at a local grocery store, and that he seemed very uncomfortable to see her. In his book, Wasted, Tales of a Gen X Drunk, Mark Judge described working at a local grocery store in the summer of 1982. It's all consistent. The circumstances surrounding her coming forward to this committee also support her. First, she made contact with elected representatives before Judge Kavanaugh was even nominated. This isn't some political hit job. Before he was even nominated, she came forward with this testimony. Second, she submitted to a lengthy, intrusive, emotional, as she said, polygraph record. We didn't call for the polygraph tester to sit before her so we could question them. The report concluded that she was truthful and now a part of the committee's record. Third, number 3, she reportedly called for an FBI investigation into her claims, fully understanding that a false statement to the FBI could subject her to criminal penalties. We all know what it means when you get a call from a committee staffer, or partisan in this case, versus when you get a call from the FBI. Where lying to them is a felony. That is a powerful difference between a committee investigation and an FBI agent interviewing people, chasing after facts, pulling on the loose threads that have been evident in Judge Kavanaugh's record. And fourth, she came forward publicly despite knowing she would face harsh public scrutiny, threats, relentless invasions of privacy, that her life would be forever altered. We've heard a lot about the effect on Judge Kavanaugh, which is real and not exaggerated, but the effect on her as well and what she had to submit to by coming forward and making that courageous testimony. Now, Judge Kavanaugh's testimony, regardless of these allegations, it stands in sharp contrast to Dr. Ford's testimony. First, Judge Kavanaugh has everything to lose should these allegations be fully investigated and proven true. Everything to lose. And that's why I don't think he wants a full investigation. Second, he has given numerous opportunities, time and time again, to call for an FBI investigation, call for an independent investigation to clear his name. But he's refused to do so. If I was in the balance and was being accused of things that I knew were lies, I would be demanding every bit of evidentiary investigation possible, not just the FBI. I'd be calling for independent investigators. I'd be calling on every loose thread, but he hasn't. He's refused to call for this committee to hear even live testimony from witnesses that could corroborate his story or the doctor's. Third, his testimony and claims regarding his drinking habits and behavior in high school and college beyond have been contradicted by so many people. His statements have just proven to be not true. Judge Kavanaugh's freshman college roommate, James Roach, has said that he was frequently incoherently drunk and that he became aggressive and belligerent when he was drunk. But that's not the only one that said this. Liz Swisher, Judge Kavanaugh's friend from Yale College, to whom he referred to numerous times, said it's not credible for Judge Kavanaugh to say that he has no memory lapses in the nights that he drank to excess. And I'll tell you this, Mr. Chairman, Lynn Brooks, who said she did not want to come forward, another friend from Yale, and showing that this is not partisan, she is a Republican, Mr. Chairman. She did not want to come forward, but last night, after listening to his testimony, was so offended by his lies that this is what his friend from Yale, a registered Republican, said. There is no doubt in my mind that while at Yale, he was a big partier, often drank to excess, and there had to be a number of nights he does not remember. In fact, I was witness to the night he got tapped into his fraternity and was stumbling drunk, and he was in a ridiculous saying really dumb things. And I can almost guarantee that there is no way that he remembers that night. This is a registered Republican who did not want to come forward until he heard the lies of Judge Kavanaugh. Brooks said last night in an interview that there were multiple emails and texts circling amongst her classmates about how Kavanaugh was, quote, lying to the Senate Judiciary Committee in his testimony. That's from a Republican who did not want to come forward until she witnessed those lies. Judge Kavanaugh's testimony yesterday also mischaracterizes what 3 other people Dr. Ford indicated were present last night. He told us, as his exonerating evidence, kept mentioning 3 names over and over again. Judge Kavanaugh repeatedly said that 4 people who knew Dr. Ford, who Dr. Ford said were present at the gathering where she was sexually assaulted, said it didn't happen. That's just patently untrue. Mark Judge said, I have no memory of this alleged incident. This is not, it did not happen. P.J. Smith said, he has no knowledge of these allegations. That is not, it did not happen. Leland Kaiser has said through her attorney, she has no recollection of being at a party or gathering where Kavanaugh was present. That is not, it did not happen. In fact, Leland Kaiser has said she believes Dr. Ford. The only person who has denied the event has taken place, who said it did not happen, is Judge Kavanaugh. And so now this is the real point, sir.
Can you, you've gone...
I would like to finish, sir. I understand that, but may I finish my statement?
Okay. I want to ask you a question. You've gone 17 minutes. I got 3 other people who'd like to speak.
Sir, I understand that. I'm going to be closing my comments soon, and I'd like to continue.
Are you willing to let 3 other people speak?
Sir, I want to finish my comments, and you can let whoever speaks speak, sir. You're the chairman.
Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chairman,
he
can take as much of my time as he wishes.
So this nation now is watching, not in a partisan way. We just saw one Republican so offended because she knows Kavanaugh. This is not Democrats and Republicans watching. This is Americans watching right now to see what this body will do. This isn't about politics or partisanship. I will forever remember what Dr. Ford said when she came before us. She said she was performing her civic duty. She wasn't trying to destroy a man. She was a courageous, heroic woman telling her truth of sexual assault and sexual harassment. This is what was done to me, she said. Many of my colleagues yesterday said they found Dr. Ford credible. But to confirm Judge Kavanaugh, you would have to say not only that you don't believe her, Dr. Ford, but that you are so certain this didn't happen that you're willing to force a vote now without any further investigation. At best, this means you think somehow she was confused, that she doesn't really know what happened to her. Even though yesterday she told us that she remembers Brett Kavanaugh covering her mouth, seared into her memory, expressing fear at the time that he might accidentally kill her. She told us details from 2012, 13, 16, and 17, told to her therapist, to her husband. And so this is where we are in the United States of America right now. This is not a partisan moment. This is a moral moment in our nation. We do not have to have this vote today. We can correct from the mistakes of the past in this nation. There are millions of people, men and women, survivors of sexual assault, who are watching this body of powerful people, and what will happen? This toxic culture, this pernicious patriarchy in this country has to stop. It's real in this country, and people are suffering, and they're watching this body right now. Children abused, watching what powerful people in religious institutions, how they sweep it aside, deny, attack. People in corporations or news media outlets who were abused and harassed for years. And their testimony, their truth was swept aside, belittled. They were attacked, they were vilified, they were followed by investigators. Millions are watching this body and how we act. Do we rush to a vote? Will we brush aside a credible witness's testimony? Will we belittle and attack credible testimony? Will we ignore credible testimony? Will we listen? Will we believe? In the United States of America right now, there are dark corners of our culture. The Center for Disease Control reports 1 out of every 3 American women, 1 out of 3 American women will experience some form of sexual violence. 1 out of 6 men. 60% of them go unreported. And there are those right now watching this group of powerful people. How will we deal with a privileged man? A seat on the Supreme Court is not an entitlement. Just because you went to Yale Law School or were the captain of your basketball team, the Supreme Court is not an entitlement. And Mr. Chairman, I'll tell you this is not a court of law. We're not saying that this man is guilty of what he said. The question is do we know enough now to delay this? Or are we going to rush to put someone on the Supreme Court with this cloud hanging over them? I cannot stomach that we are going to move forward, that we are going to say to women across this country, that say to men across this country.
I think that question,
and I'm going to finish.
I think that question you just asked is a good place to stop.
Sir, I will stop with this. I will stop with this with respect for this committee and respect for you. I cannot sit here. I cannot participate in what I know history is going to look back as a dark moment again, in the same way we look back at the Anita Hill, Clarence Thomas trials. I cannot participate in that. I conclude my remarks, sir. We should not brush aside her comments. We should not belittle her testimony. We should listen to her. We should listen to women. And we should thoroughly investigate this before moving forward. To do any other thing is to diminish the truth, diminish the issue of sexual harassment in this country, and to again relegate ourselves to what I believe is a dark, dark element of our society. With that, sir, I will leave.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In my judgment, there were no winners in this room yesterday. None. All I saw were 2 people, 2 human beings in pain. All of us, in my opinion, including Dr. Kavanaugh, or Dr. Ford rather, and Judge Kavanaugh, have a blinkered perspective. Whatever happened 40 years ago. And that's just a fact. I don't know what happened to Dr. Ford. I don't know if we'll ever know what happened to Dr. Ford. I do believe that something very, very, very bad happened to Dr. Ford, and I am very sorry. But I do not believe that Judge Brett Kavanaugh was involved. And that's why I will support his nomination. Now let me talk about something that I'm a little more certain of. And I will be brief, Mr. Chairman. This has been, as someone put it in an article this morning, a grotesque carnival. In my opinion, this has been an intergalactic freak show. As far as I'm concerned, Congress has hit rock bottom and started to dig. And all of this could have been avoided. Every bit of it. The other thing I'm certain of is that these cynical games, this character assassination, has damaged Dr. Ford and Judge Kavanaugh and their families irreparably. And it could have been avoided. Now, Senator Feinstein talked about this earlier, and she's right. How we treat women in America does matter. This is no country for creepy old men or young men or middle-aged men. But this is no country at all, in my opinion, at least not the kind of country I want to live in, without due process. Both the accuser and the accused are entitled to respect and fairness, and yes, to due process. To the person who leaked Dr. Ford's letter, to the person who breached Dr. Ford's anonymity, and to the person who did not tell her she could have avoided this by testifying privately in her home in California. You know who you are. You should bow your head in shame, in my opinion, and you should hide your head in a bag every day for the rest of your natural life. And you also ought to read something. I don't know if you believe in God or if you read the Bible, but there's wisdom in a passage, whether you read the Bible or believe in God or not. And I'd refer you to Matthew 16:26. For what is a person profited? For what is a person profited if he gains the whole world and he loses his soul? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
These till the fall of the gavel.
Mr. Chairman?
You yielded your time, you told me.
I yielded part of my time to Senator Booker Do I have any left?
You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll yield my time to him, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate that graciousness, and I hope it is a sign that we will rebuild across the aisle. Yesterday, there were words spoken, and we know in families that words are spoken in anger and sometimes in the moment that we later walk back. Those words yesterday from members across the aisle to this side were extraordinary for a confirmation hearing, and I know they would say that some of our words to them may be on the same level, but we have worked together, we've traveled together, we have a responsibility together to do the business of the United States Senate. And Mr. Chairman, I know you may not agree with me, but I think in the spirit of working together, a delay in this vote would be appropriate. I'm here to make a last appeal that we avoid a rush to judgment with great respect for your position. The session yesterday was a job interview. And it's a job interview for a position unlike any other. I have tremendous reverence for the United States Supreme Court. I was a law clerk there. I've argued 4 cases there. I've spent most of my career in the courts. And my belief is that this decision on how to vote, and I will vote no, is among the most important that I will make as a United States Senator. The United States of America deserves not just a good nominee, but the best person for the job. And the person that we saw come before us yesterday was filled with such rancor and animus, such anger, that I cannot accept that he would be an impartial and objective justice on the United States Supreme Court. To describe members of this committee as a left-wing conspiracy, to threaten, literally to threaten United States senators, I simply cannot accept. We are interviewing, or we were, Judge Kavanaugh for a position that is a lifetime appointment to the highest court in the land. He cannot be removed except through impeachment, and he will be there for decades to come. I made no secret of my opposition to him based on his out-of-the-mainstream views and judicial philosophy, his apparent goal to chip away, if not overturn, Roe v. Wade and the guarantees that allow women to decide when and whether they become pregnant and have children, the decision by millions of Americans to marry the person they love, consumer rights, workers' rights, the powers of the president, which I think would become an imperial presidency if he becomes a justice on the Supreme Court. But yesterday, my opposition solidified because of temperament and fitness, which I believe he lacks. By virtue of the screed that he sat here and gave us, his views still are disqualifying for me, but his character and fitness ought to be a reason for everyone to vote no. We saw a witness yesterday of an entirely different character and temperament, a woman who told us her story in steady, even, helpful terms, a story that was deeply painful for her. And she has endured threats and public assassination, character assassination, public shaming that no one should have to suffer. My heart goes out to her as well as to Judge Kavanaugh's family. These kinds of vile comments or threats have no place in our public discourse. She has every reason to remain silent and no incentive personally to come forward except to do a public service for the nation, as she stated. And her story was powerful, compelling, personal. I believe her. I have to disbelieve an angry and defiant man whose story simply does not hold up. He claimed that the FBI had already investigated him because they did a background check 6 times. The FBI never investigated Dr. Blasey Ford's allegations. It never investigated Deborah Ramirez's allegations. It never investigated Julie Swetnick's allegations. Those are gaps in our work that remain to be done. In fact, the ABA issued a statement this morning supporting an FBI investigation into Judge Kavanaugh. According to one of our colleagues, the ABA's rating is the gold standard. The committee investigators may be conscientious and dedicated, but they are simply no substitute for the trained professionals with the expertise and experience of FBI agents. A person who is innocent would want the FBI to investigate their claims and clear their name. Judge Kavanaugh refused to make that request. Dr. Blasey Ford did so. The question is, what is he hiding? What is the administration concealing? Why have we not received those millions of pages of documents that remain hidden? Why has Judge Kavanaugh not taken a polygraph? He says they're not reliable, and that the polygraph Dr. Ford subjected herself to was meaningless. She passed it. As a judge on the DC Circuit, Judge Kavanaugh ruled that they are, in fact, meaningful. He wrote, quote, "Law enforcement agencies use polygraphs to test the credibility of witnesses and criminal defendants. Refusing to take a polygraph, Judge Kavanaugh has failed that test." Judge Kavanaugh claimed that all 4 witnesses Dr. Blasey Ford identified as being present at the party have said that the sexual assault, quote, "didn't happen." Only one person has said the sexual assault didn't happen, Brett Kavanaugh. The other 3 partygoers Dr. Blasey Ford identified said they do not remember the incident. That is a big difference. Do not recall is a different statement than it didn't happen. And the other woman Dr. Blasey Ford named, who was there, has since publicly stated that she believes Dr. Blasey Ford's account. Judge Kavanaugh tried to give himself an alibi, making it sound like he didn't drink on weeknights. His own high school calendar, which he provided the committee as evidence, contradicts that statement. During the hearing, in an exchange with my colleague, Senator Booker, Judge Kavanaugh admitted that one of the entries on his calendar from a Thursday signified that he went to a friend's house to drink. He said repeatedly that he never in his life drank so much that he couldn't remember. Numerous people who spent considerable time with him during the hearing in high school, during his high school, college, and law school years, confirmed that he frequently drank to excess and sometimes became belligerent. Finally, Judge Kavanaugh claimed that he has always treated women with dignity and respect. His words. Yet he and his high school friends named one of my constituents, Renata Dolphin, in their yearbook pages, saying they were her alumnus, reducing her to a sexual conquest. That is no way to treat women with dignity and respect. In fact, she attested to the pain that it has caused her. He would have us believe that these brave, courageous sexual assault survivors have come forward as part of a vast right-wing conspiracy. How insulting to them to say that they are pawns or puppets of us or anyone else. In fact, they are brave, courageous, independent women who have stepped forward. And so I want to say in conclusion to the men of America, for you, I hope this will be a teaching moment, not to denigrate anyone who has been a survivor of sexual assault, but to lift them up. I want to enter into the record the stories of a number of constituents of mine whose pain, sadness, shame, self-doubt, guilt, fear are powerfully attested to in these statements, Mr. Chairman.
Without objection, so ordered.
They are the heroes here. Dr. Blasey Ford is a profile in courage. And I want to say to her sons, you should be proud of your mother. You should be proud of your mom. She is a profile in courage, and her name will be in the history books long after ours are gone. She will be remembered as someone who stepped forward truly to speak truth to power. We use that phrase a lot. She did it yesterday. And I am proud to say that I believe Dr. Blasey Ford, and I hope that her two sons and her husband are as proud of her as we should be. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And with that, I will oppose the nominee, and I will step out.
We'll stand at ease till the fall of the gavel.